Okay. Let's get started. Welcome to another Svelte London. Woo. Um, first of all, housekeeping, code of conduct, find that on the GitHub. By being here, you're implicitly agreeing to this code of conduct. You haven't sold your soul yet, but no promises. Donations are welcome. This is a completely community-funded event. Pizza isn't cheap, so feel free. Thank you to Cloudflare for hosting us. It's been a while. I think Rich was here the last time we had a Cloudflare meetup. So pretty cool to be back. Svelte Summit, we have been having another in-person conference in Barcelona in May. I'd love to see some of you there. There is a discount code, which I'll put somewhere. I guess you're gonna have to ask me. It's no whiteboard, but it's valid for today and tomorrow. And who knows how much it is? I guess you get to find out when you buy a ticket. Schedule. So first up, we have Paolo, who some of you might know, Svelte maintainer and ambassador, talking about signals in Svelte. And then we have Confidence, a guy from Cloudflare who is everyone can thank for getting us in the space, talking about Svelte and R2. So hopefully, Paolo. Okay, Paolo, can you say something? Can you hear us? Mm. Paolo, can you hear us? Uh-huh. You can hear us? Yeah?
Yes, a bit low, but I can hear you.
Perfect. Sorry about that.
Not
Are
a
you
worry.
ready?
Yes.
Cool. You have the floor.
So, okay. I mean, I'm just live. I'm already live.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Oh, okay. So I can
That's
start.
right.
That's the point. Sorry. Can I start or? Okay, I can start. Okay, guys. Sorry, I was also. Let me stand up because it's better, and we can actually start now. Okay, so welcome everyone, and so this is the title of my talk. It's called "Surprise: Svelte Secretly Sending Signals." Before we begin, who am I? I am Paolo Ricciuti, and I come from Campobasso, Italy. Some of you may know me. I already did some talk here, and you can find me on Blue Sky as paolo.ricciuti.me. You can find me on GitHub as Paolo Ricciuti. I'm a Svelte ambassador, and I recently joined as a Svelte maintainer, which I'm very proud of. And I work as a senior software engineer at MinMatter, which is very cool because I get to work with Svelte, but also to teach Svelte, but at meetups, conferences, and stuff like that, but also on my day-to-day job, because we do what's called team augmentation, which means that we basically come work with you on your project. We teach you all the best practice and stuff like that. And when we leave, hopefully you will be ready to actually maintain your project by yourself. Demo time. Because this is my last slide basically, because this will be a fully complete live coding thing, just because I like to suffer. And so let me open this. Okay, so before we begin, if you know me, you know that I'm a bit of a nice, I like to do live stuff and stuff like that. So if you want to scan this QR code, I'll leave you there for a bit. You will have access to a remote control with a red button and a green button. And if you press it, yeah, as you can see, you can basically tell me if you are liking this talk or not. And votes are for the last minute. So after 1 minute, I will retract your oldest vote. You can vote whatever, how many times you want. And this will basically live telling me if you are liking this talk or not, just because live coding was not stressful enough. So let's jump right into it. Basically, what I want to do is with Svelte 5, Svelte introduced the concept of runes, and under the hood, they use signals. And a lot of people seems to be confused by runes and by signals in general. But at the end of the day, they are really not that difficult. And I want to prove it to you by starting from something that maybe you are familiar with if you work with Svelte 4, which is the concept of a store, of a writable store, and slowly moving toward signals to show you really that they're not that different. So to figure out, to do this, we have the most useless demo ever, which is a very simple demo. It's a counter that should not work unless you check this. For the moment, it's not working, but we will get to that. So you have a checkbox that can disable basically the counter, and then you have this input that is reflected on top of that. And below here we have a console, and for the moment it's just showing when you check and uncheck. So let's jump right into it. So on the other side you can see my code, and this is a very bare bone implementation of a writable store. It's very easy. You have the value, you can pass the initial value, and you have the value. You have a list of subscribers, which is just a set, and you have a subscribe function that add the function to the subscribers, invoke the function, and then return a function to unsubscribe from it. You have a set function that just set the value to the new value, and then invoke the function that are inside the subscribers with the new value every time. And then you have the update function, and it's just calling set with a getter, the value returned from this getter that also takes the value as input. And this is the classic observer pattern, and how you use it is very simple. You can create a writable of 0, of false, or the most useless demo, and then you can count subscribe and count and check subscribe and value subscribe and stuff like that. So this is basically wiring up the reactivity, and basically this will be called whenever count changes, and it will set the new value of count inside as the inner text of num, which is this one. Same thing for checked, which is console logging, just because otherwise it would have no effect, and for value. And then obviously you have the listeners. So on the button, when you click, and this is where like it's not that great, because to interact with the writable store, you actually need to do this kind of stuff. Like you have to update, and then you get the count and do count +1, you do checked and value and stuff like that. Now, the problem is I want this counter to not be increased when the checkbox is not checked. So how can we do this? Well, the point is, since these two are two different writable stores, I really can't do it. You could do something like what Svelte did. So what Svelte did was doing count.subscribe, and then basically it created a new count. It created an outside variable like this, and was constantly updating this is equal to new count like this. And you can do this for every store and then keep track of this function, but then you would also need a way to invalidate, so that these would also rerun when count runs. It's a mess. So for the moment, to make this thing work, let's change it in a bit of a less performant way, but it's fine for the moment. So we can do const state is equal to writable, and then we can have a single writable store with all the data that we need. Yeah, exactly. Count, checked, and writable. And so if we remove these, what we can do here is now we can do state here, and then we can do state and state.count. We can do state here, and we can do state here, and state.checked. And we also need to do it here. And same thing for state.value, like this. Oh, state.value, and we also need state.value here. Now, this is where it gets very dirty updating, because actually what you need to do is state.update. And yeah, basically you will need to do something like this. So you need to spread the old state and then update the count like this. And same thing here, you need to do state.update, and you need to do something like this with checked. And same thing here, state.update, and update the value like this. So now that we did this, we can actually do the change that I wanted to make. So I can do if $state checked, then update the number, otherwise no. Now that we save, the demo is actually the same, and we actually got a small preview of something that I wanted to show later. But this is working. Now this is not working because we are not checking, but when we check, it's working. Now, obviously, the first thing that I don't like is this. This is a lot of it's very cumbersome to update the state like this. So how can we fix this? Let me introduce you to a wonderful API, the proxy API. So the proxy API is a JavaScript API, and you can return a new proxy. And if you are not aware of what a proxy is, basically is you can pass in an object, and then you have a series of traps. So this trap, just like a proxy, like a network proxy, basically allow you to inject value. Those are functions that you can define that will be called on whatever instruction, whenever operation you do on the specified object. So for example, if I have the get trap, this will be invoked with the target and the key on every value that you try to do. So you can return reflect.get target and key, and this is basically the default behavior. But obviously I can do something else, like I can log, for example, target and key. And now if I try to create a proxy, const p is equal proxy name Paolo, for example, and then I try to console.log p.name, you can see that when I save in the logs, I get Paolo, which is the log. And then before that, I actually got the whole object name Paolo, which is the target, and the key that I'm trying to access. And the nice thing is that if I return Scott, for example, and I save, you can see that despite the fact that my object has a name property with the value of Paolo, I'm actually returning Scott here, which is like, it's very powerful, right? But the thing that we are actually interested in is not the get key, but is the set key. So you get the new value. So if I create the set trap like this, const ret is equal to set, and I can return ret here. And if I try to console.log here, setting key to new value, exactly. So if I do this, now let's say that I try to do p.name is equal to Scott. If I save, you can see that we are trying to setting name to Scott. And in this case, we actually succeed, but we could change this and say Svelte London, for example. And if I save, you see that I'm actually changing the behavior. Like you're trying to set p.name to Scott, but I'm actually setting it to Svelte London. Obviously, I'm not interested in this kind of stuff. Like I want the behavior to be the same, but these actually allow us to build something which is very close to the writable with a much nicer API to interact with it. So let's build it. We can do const subscribers is equal a new set, just like before. And then obviously here, whenever we set, exactly, we loop over the subscribers and we call the function. And we don't even need to call the function with the value. The reason is because we are still changing the original object. So the user can just use that instead of receiving a new thing, like, which is even better. Obviously, we need a way to subscribe, and we cannot do it with the .subscribe method. So for the moment, what we can do is let's actually wrap these in an array, and let's implement a subscribe function here, like this, and Copilot is helping me. So it's the same as before, adding the subscriber, invoking the function, and returning an unsubscribe. So we can return the subscribe function here, and now we can actually change our code in a much better way. So how can we change it? Well, first thing first, we need to change the function call. We need to destructure the subscribe method here, and then we need to change this subscribe state actually need to be just subscribe like this. And we also want to remove this $state because we are not actually accessing it anymore. We also want to change this state to just be state because we don't need it. But now it's where the nice thing happens, is because instead of all these, we can now just do state.count plus plus. Much nicer, right? And we can do state.checked is equal to e.target.checked. Much nicer. And we can do state.value is equal to e.target.value. And just like this, this should work basically the same, and is working, right? So yeah, this is the same demo as before. Now, there is still a couple of problems with this implementation. First, I mean, obviously, returning subscribe from the proxy is still not ideal, like it's not the best API ever. And if I try to do console.log running here, you can see that obviously this is running now. And if I click the button, it's still running, even though checked didn't actually change. So like if you see, there's no UI that changes in this case, but we are still running the code. But I mean, in this case, it's probably fair because like check this here and count is here. But really, the problem is where you change the input, because like despite the input being absolutely disconnected from the actual count, sorry, you're still running all this code, and this is another not nice thing. There's also another problem, subtle problem, because this basically means that we can have one single proxy with all our state crammed in. Because if we have multiple proxy, we still fall back to the same behavior of like having multiple things that cannot interact with them, because the subscribe is basically tied to the proxy. So really what we want is an API that allow us to have one function. You can pass a function to this function, and whatever you read inside that function become a dependency. So in this case, when you read checked, this function becomes a dependency of checked. And maybe we also want the dependencies to be like very tied to the single key, so that we don't have this problem of like, if I change value, I don't want to rerun this. So this may seem familiar to you if you use Svelte 5, and I can make it even more familiar if I rename this subscribe function to $effect, for example. So this is effectively the kind of function that we want, right? So obviously, we still don't want to return it from proxy. We want to return it from $state, but also we don't want this to be tied to a proxy. So let's actually start changing the code. We can remove this. This is the API that we want. The effect should be completely untied to the state, so that even if you have multiple states, they will still like participate in the dependency array, not the dependency array, because it's bad, dependency array. So we can actually remove the writable because we don't need it anymore, and let's write our new $effect function. So as we said, this needs to take a function as input, and basically what it should do is whatever value, whatever key you read inside it, it should have that effect as a dependency. So we have a way, and we actually explored it before, to know when you read something inside a proxy, and is get, right? So we have our get function, our get drop. We have the target and the key, and we can just return reflect.get target and key, because again, we don't want to change that behavior. But what we want is, here we want to do something like when we are reading the value, if you are running inside an effect, we want to track that effect as a dependency. But there's no API in JavaScript to know in which function we are running, but we can actually use something to our advantage, because the moment you pass a function as input to another function, this is actually a reference in JavaScript, because function is an object, and whatever you pass into a function is actually a reference to that object. So this means that we can store that reference somewhere. So what we can do is we can do let current effect like this, and then inside effect, before running the function, we can do let old effect is equal to current effect. Current effect is equal to function. We can then invoke the function and then set the current effect back to this. And just for the sake of completeness, let's actually try to finally do this, so that if we throw some error, we are fine, and we don't need to handle that. So by doing this, inside current effect, when this function is running, there will be this function. So what we can do here is actually do if current effect. So if there is a current effect, we want to do subscribers dot add current effect. So when we read some value, if there is a current effect, it means we are running inside an effect, and we want to rerun that effect whenever that value changes. Pretty straightforward, right? So we can actually remove the subscribe function here, because we don't need it anymore. And we can delete this function here. And now this works just as before. As you can see, it's running again, it's running, and it's running, and it's running, right? Obviously, we still have the problem of multiple running, right? We need to fix that too. We fixed a couple of these problems, like the fact that you can have multiple state and the fact that we now have an external dependency, an external function to register the dependencies. But we still have the problem of multiple effects. So how can we do it? Well, really the problem is that every state has a single set of subscriber, and it should have actually a set for every key. So how can we do it? We need a map. So what we need to do is here we can actually check if subscribers dot has not current effect but key, and if it doesn't, we can create a new subscriber, which is a new set of subscribers, and then we can do const subs is equal subscribers dot get key, and then instead of adding two subscribers, we add two subs like this. Obviously, we also need to change this. We need to spread this and say subscribers.get key, and we can also fall back to an empty array in case it has not. So now, as you can see, like the first time is obviously running because this is the dependency that is triggering. But now, if I change this demo, it's not rerunning this code. So we actually improved in this state too, right? There is still one problem because once I increase the counter and the counter is not triggering this, and it's good, is what we want because we actually never read count, but when we check, it's actually running and it's actually inserting the count into the inner text. There is still a problem. Now the counter doesn't work anymore. Why? Well, because we fumbled a bit. Because here we are setting the current effect to the function itself. And this is wrong because we only add a subscription when current effect is something. So the first time that you run the effect, we set the current effect. But when we rerun the function, like the subscriber is just the function, is not all this code too. So how can we fix this? Pretty simple. We can do function actual effect. And the actual effect is the whole thing. So when you call effect, this function is created, and the current effect is the actual effect and not the function. So this function will actually be the subscriber. So when we invoke, because we changed it, before actually invoking the function, we are setting back the current effect to this function again. So obviously we need to call it the first time, we save, and now we actually, the demo works. And then when we click, it's not running because check this never changed. When we check, now it's running again, and now the counter actually working, and we can start to see that running is actually running every time. Still one small bug. When we switch back, if we now click, running is still there. Why is that? Well, because as you remember, before, when we were subscribing to adding the function to subscribers, we were also returning a function to unsubscribe from it that basically deleted the subscription from there. And we are not doing that anymore here. So once a key has a subscription, is forever for the moment, just like a diamond. So how can we fix this? Well, the point is, when you are running an effect, every time you run this function, you are running the code again and you're accessing the values again. So actually, it's completely fine to remove every subscription before running the function. So basically, whatever key has this effect as a subscription, we can remove this effect from their subscription and then run the function again. And so this will mean that if you then in the next run don't read a variable, that variable will not be in the dependency anymore. How can we do this? We can create a subscribers, which is a new set. And then instead of having just the function here, this can actually be an object with the function that is actual effect. And we also pass the subscribers array, subscriber set. And why we need this? Well, because now when we register the subscription, first thing first, when we add, we need to add the function, obviously. But we also do current effect dot subscribers dot add, and we add the set of subscription of this key to the subscribers of the effect. So now the effect knows all the set that has the actual effect as a subscription. I know it's a bit weird. It's a bunch of set of set of set, but it's very easy at the end of the day. It's basically keeping track of all the keys that has itself as a subscription. And now we can clear that up. So before running the effect, we loop over subs of subscribers like this. And then what we do is subs.delete current effect, actual effect, sorry. So we delete the subscription from all the keys that has this effect as a subscription. And then just for good reason, we do subscribers.clear. Now that we did this, we actually are in a pretty good spot because we are not running initially. When we click, we actually run every time. And when we click back, we don't run anymore. So why? Well, because we before changing checked, there's no reason to run that code because it will not update this. So we save compute time. And now, obviously, when it's needed, we actually have the ability to do so. Now, we are in a pretty good spot. There's one thing left missing. If I do this, Svelte London, and I save, watch what happened when I try to change one single thing here. Now it's stuck to Svelte London, and I cannot write anything here. Why is this? Well, because currently our reactivity system is completely synchronous. This means that here, by the next line, when we set something, we already invoked every single effect that this value has attached to it. So since this value has this effect as a dependency, it means that by the moment you finish this code already ran. And so the input now has the value of Svelte London. And when we try to set it back here, we are actually setting the value to Svelte London. So that's why it's basically stuck. So how can we fix this? Well, we need to view our effects. So how can we do it? Const to run is equal a new set. There's a bunch of set in this sulk. Then we can do let scheduled is equal to false by default, and then function run. And here, the only thing that we do is exactly this. Actually, we need to do const r is equal to run. We need to spread the run array. And the reason for this is because if you don't spread it, when you invoke the function, you can add something to this array. So if that happens, and this basically happens if you try to reassign state inside an effect, this to run will enter in an infinite loop, basically. So what we need to do is we save the array, we clear the array, and then we run every function, and we set back schedule to false. And obviously, we need to change something in the set function too, because now what we need to do is if not scheduled, then we do scheduled through, and then instead of set timeout, we can do queue microtask run. And then instead of immediately invoking the function, we can do to run.add function. Now we save, and now we can edit this thing back. And we also gained a bit of performance. Now, this is it. Like our implementation is complete. As you can see, like it doesn't take much. It's a bit more complex than an actual writable store, but it's also much more powerful. And the thing that I want to be clear is, obviously, this implementation is nowhere near what Svelte is actually doing under the hood, for a couple of different reasons. First, obviously, like Dominic, Rich, and Simon really squeeze the performance of signals. Like there are a bunch of optimization, both in terms of data structure in the Svelte code base, and also in terms of like every unnecessary work is avoided. Obviously, we also have derived, for example, which is another thing that we are not implementing now, but it's also adding to the complexity of the task. And we also have different kind of effects, because this is the effect that you are using as a user of Svelte, but inside Svelte we are using a bunch of effects that have subtle differences, because we also have to like take care of animations, for example, transitions and stuff like that. So it's obviously much more simplified. This is not Svelte, but the underlying idea is the same. And that's important, because you can now use these framework that we built as a point of reference when you are having some reactivity problem. For example, let's say that you are sometimes you want to do some asynchronous work, and you do await Svelte London, for example, right? Now, when we save, you can see that the counter is completely broken. Now, this may seem counterintuitive, and a lot of people are catched by this. Why is not working anymore? Well, now you know that by the time the thing after the await runs, we already set back the current effect to null, to old effect, because we are invoking this synchronously. And so, since after the await runs after a microtask, you are long gone by this, like you already run this code when the actual read of the variable, which is this and this, happen. So if you do like state.count, this actually works. And the reason because it's work is because you are actually reading it before the await, and so you are still registering a dependency. Another thing that trips people off is the fact that why is this not rerunning if count is actually a dependency, like it's in the effect? Well, that was old reactivity model, because now you know that a subscriber is only added when you actually read the value. So if you never enter in this if, you never read count, and there's no need for the effect to rerun. That's it for real this time. I hope you learned something, and I hope this was interesting. And if you have any question, please feel free to ask.
Can you hear us again?
Yes.
Sweet. Oh, hang on. Mhm. Sweet. Does anyone have any questions? No?
Thanks for the great explanation. It's nice to have. Yeah, just not a question. Just thanks for the great explanation. It's really good to have signals broken down, like such a down to basics manner. Very cool. Thank you.
Happy to help. Like, this was basically the goal of this talk.
Sweet. It doesn't look like there's any questions on YouTube. So thanks, Paolo.
Okay, just one other question. Like, I mean, if you know, there will be a workshop held before the Svelte Summit on the 7th of May, and I do have a free, like a discount for the ticket. I don't know when you want to do the raffle, Willow.
Send me a message on WhatsApp and we'll do it right at the end.
Okay, perfect.
Cool.
So
Thanks.
ping me up when you're doing the raffle.
Awesome. So next up, we have confidence. You ready? Cool.
Bye, guys.
So I guess I joined the stream. You're fixed. Let me know if you're able to see my screen on the stream.
Are you sharing?
Yes, I think so.
Can you do a camera?
Okay, so this is, let's reshare.
Do you have a camera or do you need to turn it off?
Okay, let me try.
Try.
Yeah.
I think that
Let's
means
see.
it's off.
Oh, it's on. It's not coming on. Let's see. Okay, so I have to reload. Reload. It doesn't seem like it's picking up my camera, so we just have to go without getting the camera through to the stream.
Okay, you're good.
Yeah. Hi everyone. So my name is Confidence. I am a developer advocate at Cloudflare. And what my work involves is teaching people how to build using Cloudflare products. And today we'll be looking at R2. So a quick introduction into R2 and how you can use R2 to build in Svelte apps. So just to have a feel of what our familiarity level is, has anyone used object storage in the past or know what object storage are? If you've used it, let me see your hands up. Okay, so keep your hands up if you have used S3 in the past. So everyone still has their hands up, which is nice. Keep your hands up if you have used R2 in the past. Just one person. 3 people. Okay, so that's great. The truth is, if you've used S3 in the past, you've actually used R2 because it's virtually the same system. The idea is giving you a storage mechanism where you can store unstructured data. So the 3 building blocks of modern applications are compute, databases, and storage. But this is 2025. We've added one more. Who can guess what the last pillar is? Close. AI. It's AI now. So yeah, so it's AI. And as a platform, Cloudflare wants you to build as quickly as possible without having to worry about infrastructure, setting up compute, setting up storages or database, or even figuring out how to run your own model. So we provide all of these building blocks free of charge for you to get started so that you can build as quickly as possible. And R2 is one of them. So this is what this is how R2 compares with S3. Since many of you here have used S3, I'm just going to go straight to the comparison table so you see what the differences are. It's the same problem that is being solved for, but you can see how Cloudflare tries to solve this problem a bit differently. Can you see that Cloudflare is comparatively cheaper while also giving you unlimited data transfer? So it means if you have stuff stored on Cloudflare and you need to move it around, you're not going to get charged for it. And if you need to take stuff out of Cloudflare, let's say you use R2, you end up not liking it, and you need to
Zoom it in a bit.
Okay. Okay, I guess this should be better. And as I was saying, you tried R2, you ended up not liking it, and you need to move your data somewhere else. Can you see that egress fees is what? Free, which is nice. So it means you can take your data wherever you need to, and you're not locked down into the platform. But hopefully, when you do try using R2, you enjoy it and you keep using it. And we have a really generous free plan, which gives you 10 gig of bandwidth per month to play around and see what you can do. So what I'll do in this quick demo is we'll build a Svelte app and add a file upload widget to it in 5 minutes. You guys want to do that? So let's someone volunteer to set the timer so we can get started and see if I'm able to do it in 5 minutes. Anyone has a stopwatch? Okay. So 5 minutes. What we're going to do again is we want to get started from scratch, build a Svelte app in Cloudflare Workers, and add file storage to it, and get it to upload files to R2. I want to see how quickly we can get started using Svelte and R2. Okay, so let's start the timer. All right. So one thing I did is I forgot to mention I'm going to cheat a bit, and then I'm going to use Claude to get the app started. So what I have in this prompt is I'm telling Claude to get the scaffolding of the app done. So the UI, have the widget built, and also to get a progress bar added. And it's also going to be using the S3 API, the S3 SDK. So it means if you already have apps that you use S3 for, and you have the AWS S3 SDK as your way of interacting with S3, you can simply just swap your credentials and use R2 if that's something you want to do without having to change any line of code. And that's really awesome. So Claude is going to go ahead to generate this app and style it using Tailwind CSS and make sure it matches the Cloudflare color scheme. So this is done now. I am going to copy this and let's generate a new project. So I'm going to be using the create Cloudflare CLI, and we're telling it to generate a project called Svelte R2 upload. We're going to tell it what kind of application we are creating. So it's a framework. We use SaltKit. We want to use the minimal flavor, want some TypeScript, want prettier, we want ESLint, we want Tailwind CSS. We don't want any of the extra packages, want to install with NPM. And that should set up the project for us. Sorry, this is a bit small, so I'll just zoom in a bit if that makes things better. So that should install the dependencies with NPM. And what this is going to do is bootstrap a project, a Svelte project, using Cloudflare Workers, which makes it not only easy for us to store our objects in R2, but we can actually deploy the application itself to Workers. So this is done now. Do we want to deploy the application? So let's say no. And we can cd into Svelte R2 upload. So this is what that project looks like. And we have the application here. I'm just going to open up the pages.svelte, and we can go run this. So npm run dev. All right, and we can copy this over and run this in the browser. So this is like everything you'd expect, but we don't have the component that was generated by Claude added. So I'm just going to quickly grab this. And let's go in here. How are we doing on time? Okay, so this is going to be called upload.sort. So I have the component added. Let's go to the page and let's quickly do an import. Okay. Okay, so we have errors, and that's because we haven't installed the S3 SDK. So I'm just going to do a quick npm install. So that should get the SDK added, and we can go on to keep running the server. So this is npm run dev, head back here. So we need a couple of things to configure this to work correctly. So as you can see, Claude already generated an app that runs using the AWS S3 SDK. So what we need to do is just tell it where the bucket is, the region, and pass in our access key and also secret access key. So for the region, because this is not AWS, we won't have to worry about setting a region. There's no US is one because Cloudflare runs globally, so you don't have to like worry about regions. So what I'm just going to do is set the region to auto, all right. And for the bucket name, let's just call this Svelte upload. We haven't created this bucket, so I'll need to go get it created. Now let's head back to my Cloudflare dashboard. And I will need to zoom in so you can see this. Select my account. Scroll down to storage and databases. Okay, it's here actually. R2 objects. That was in our timer, right? Okay. So create bucket, bucket name. So upload, cool. Region selection is automatic, what we specified earlier. So we're going to create the bucket. We have the bucket created. Now I'll go to do a few things here. So let's go back and let's grab the credentials we need to connect to this bucket. Because if you take a look at what we have here in on line 16 and 17, we need to set the access key and the secret key. So I'll go into the API, use R2 with, so manage API tokens. Let's create a new API. Let's call this, so upload, and we give it read-write object permission. Everything looks good. In your production application, this is where you want to specify the IP addresses that are allowed to upload stuff using your credentials. So you want to have that in mind. Let's create the API token. And this is my token. I hope no one steals it because I don't plan on deleting this. Okay, so let's go back here and we can use that here. We are time. Okay, so it seems we're going to run a bit over time then. But is the timer still going? It's the 5 minutes gone. Do we have a timer that is still running so we see how quickly it takes us to do this? We do, right? Okay. Okay, cool. So we have 5 minutes exhausted, but hopefully we're able to get this done. So we've gotten the access key, we've gotten the secret key, we have the bucket name and the region configured. Now, if we head back here and we reload, we should, oh, we're not using the component here. We're only imported it, but we're not using it yet. So let's use the component. Okay, and we have that component. And then when we try to upload, so let's go select a file. This looks like a good file. Let's upload to the S3. We get an error. And if you take a look at what this error is in the console, it is a, what is this? So let's do that one more time. Okay, so it looks like we have an error with the URL. So that's because by default, Claude generated a URL that is matching the S3 API. So we need to tell it what origin to use. So let's do that. So let's go here. I think this is endpoint. And we need to tell it what endpoints to use. So I'm going to head back to my dashboard, and I'm just going to copy this endpoint here. So this is going to be whatever your account ID is, which you can grab from the URL. That's the only thing that is going to change from application to application. But everything else is the r2.cloudflarestorage.com. So that is good to go. And we can paste this in. And that should be what we need to get this going. So let's give that a try again. Select files. So let's upload to S3. We have another error. And the error we're getting here is different. It's a cause error. So actually, this is a good error because it's a security warning so that we are not letting clients we don't trust upload stuff into our bucket. So to fix this, we can actually just go here and hit finish, go to the bucket we're trying to upload to, which is the Svelte upload bucket, go to settings, and we should be able to configure the course policy. So this is where you specify what hosts you want to be able to upload to your bucket. Because this is a demo and you should definitely not do this in production, I'm going to allow all origins. And we can set methods to posts, add a put method, and we also want to set allowed headers to virtually everything. Okay, So this is what we're going to do here. We're saying just allow anybody to upload anything into this bucket. And again, you guys have my API keys, so like you can abuse this if you want. So let's save this, and now we can head back here. So let's refresh, select files. So I'm selecting the invoice, we upload, and upload is complete. Now let's hope the upload actually happened. So let's go to the R2 bucket itself. So we go to objects, and we don't see anything. Wow. Let's reload. Come on, come on. Okay, we see the uploads folder, and that's the file we selected. So the today's date is appended in front of it. I think that's stuff that Claude added. And then you have the file name, and we can go to download this file, and everything works as expected. How many minutes are we in? 9 minutes. Okay, so that 10 minutes. Yeah, so that's not too bad. And we have our app fully built. Like you can take this and deploy it to production. Hopefully you don't do that because we actually have the API keys in plain text in the app. So of course, to get this to production, you want to take some security measures. First, moving the API keys into an environment file. Another thing you can do is going back to restrict the course policy. And even better yet, you can use pre-signed URLs. I'm sure the S3 guys in the room know about pre-signed URLs. R2 also supports it such that you can create a pre-signed URL, send it to the browser, get the browser to upload the file using that pre-signed URL, and then it gets locked. No one else can upload stuff, but you can download stuff using the pre-signed URL. So this is R2 in a few seconds, and I hope this gives you an idea of how awesome R2 is and how quickly it is to build with R2. And the best part, like I mentioned, if you have an S3, an application that uses the S3 client, you can just swap credentials and you're good to go when it comes to using R2. And to move your data across, if you do choose to switch to using R2, we have a couple of tools that are designed to do that specifically. So if you go to the documentation, you search for R2, I can scroll in. You go to data migration. We have a bunch of tools that are designed specifically to help you move your data over if this is something you decide to do. And that's my demo. So do we have any questions? I think we have. Okay.
Just a bit of a stupid question. Is it called R2 because it's one less than S3?
Exactly. It's before. So R2, S3. Yeah, that's a good observation. Yeah. So it comes before in the alphabet.
Faster.
Yeah, faster. It's first. Any other question? Maybe we can take one more and that should be it.
So basic question, how is Cloudflare making, including R2, all of these services so cheap and sustainable? I mean, as a user, I'm happy to use it, but sometimes I need to convince, for example, my colleagues that it's not a scam,
Oh yeah.
right? And what if it's a trap? What is your answer? How do Cloudflare usually tell people?
Okay, so I think the first answer to that question is you're being ripped off elsewhere. And two, we actually already built the infrastructure for this. So Cloudflare did not start as an object storage service. It started as a network service, which means we have data centers everywhere. And we have this extra capacity to support workloads at a cheaper rate than other providers can. So we have the infrastructure in place to make it work. And that is why it's this cheap. And when we do make optimizations to ensure that we are doing things a little bit more efficiently and we're saving on costs, we try to pass it on to the users as a lower price so that you also get to benefit from that too. So we're working on ways to store stuff efficiently and to compute efficiently. And that shows in the price difference that you saw earlier. So it makes it cheaper for us. It also makes it cheaper for you as a customer to use our products. So yeah, that's it. All right, thank you everyone. Okay. Okay.
So you showed us how to use the S3 API. Does Cloudflare have their own SDK they can use as well?
Oh, yes, yes. So there's a REST API and there is an R2 binding. So if you're building natively inside of Workers, you have bindings like you have for the AI binding and the KV binding. You have an R2 binding, or you can just use the REST API and you can like use it anywhere. But S3 is very convenient because most people are familiar with it too. So we also support that. All right, thank you.
Okay, so that naturally brings us to a close. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm going to attempt to stop the stream and save us all from this.